Hey there, this is Jürgen Beck for 8DO, and in this video we are going to look at a walkthrough of the 12-string Guitar Strummer library, which is a companion library to the 12 strings guitar solo. Of course, you can use them separately, but they really complement each other, and in fact, I'm going to demonstrate that here in just a moment, how they play off of each other. But before we do, I wanted to let you listen to this track, which is making use of articulation switching. You can actually see it happen also as the notes are being triggered and the articulations are being switched. And I'll go a little deeper into that, how exactly we're going to do this. Let me take you through the instrument. On the left side, you see the chord select segment, which has 13 different chords that have been recorded. And of course, each chord has been recorded also with a different rhythm that you see over here. Taking both of them together, the chords and the rhythms obviously makes for an insane number of variations that you can choose from. And depending on your style and what you want to create with this, this is extremely flexible. Down here we have the fret control. The fret control is primarily the sliding of the fingers as the chords are being changed. Of course, that adds to the realism, but depending on your preferences, you can bring the volume up and down, and the amount knob here changes how often a slide is being thrown into the mix of what is being played back. As already explained, this is the rhythm select section. Here, the 13 different rhythms that we have. Of course, they can all be controlled with the articulations. Down here is where the chords are being chosen. And up here is where the rhythms themselves are being chosen. And then, of course, here is where the articulations are being played back. At the bottom, we have the velocity end knob and a switch that you can set to off or on. This is primarily when you hit the chord or when you hit the key harder, then that triggers, rather than the rhythm, it triggers a final chord that is being strummed. And of course, you can set the volume level here as well. Then over here we have two settings, the mono and the X Legato. I'll demonstrate the X Legato here in just a moment. But the default setting is mono, which means that every time that you hit a key, any of the rhythms are being started from scratch, from the beginning. You just always start at where the articulation was recorded, where that rhythm was recorded. This is different with X Legato. X Legato lets you choose not only the rhythm in between playing that rhythm back, and the chord, but it then just basically picks up from wherever you have in that progression, in that rhythm, you have hit that new key, either for the chord itself or for the rhythm. Again, I'll demonstrate that here just a little bit. Underneath, we have the half speed setting and the 2-time setting. Right now, we have to set at 100 beats per minute, which of course is what you've heard, but you can slow this down to half that speed or speed it up twice as fast if you really needed to. Then over here you have all these chords selected, which means that all chords have been loaded into memory. Of course, that's rather large, and typically you wouldn't want to do this with all of them. You can uncheck each individual one, which will unload samples from memory, and of course this comes down. There's also down here with this input, you can either unload all of them or load all of them back into memory, a very quick way of doing this. So this is the quick overview of what you see on the screen. And of course, we also have our chaos effects here, effects rack. Right now, I have selected an EQ to bring down the low frequencies a little bit, and of course, our reverb convolution, which the transform convolution is also one, but this is the more traditional one that you hear. And with this one, you have additional rhythmic elements that get thrown into the mix, and makes often for really interesting results. What I want to show you next is how we're working with these key switches, both for the chords and for the rhythms. And in doing so, I'm going to play this back again and explain a little more what's happening. All right, I'm going to stop it here. There's some fancy magic happening underneath, and as I'm picking these individual notes, you see over here how the chords are being switched from a major seventh to a minor to a major. And this has something to do with how this particular DAW is selecting the key switches. You can look this up, but of course you can always just play the key down here and switch either chord or the articulation, the rhythm. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Because the velocity is very high, this is basically just taking an end chord and playing that articulation back. And so we're basically repeating this here, but there is something else happening here. And let me demonstrate that. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier, because we have the X mono selected here, the option here. When this note is being re-triggered, we're basically here just re-triggering the end articulation, but this could also be just the beginning of another playing back of that chord. And let me demonstrate that by bringing the articulation down. And you heard something else underneath there. I'm going to show you that in just a moment, but bringing this back to the original value of that velocity, then of course we have that as a end strum, which then allows us to pick up on something else that's happening. In other words, it gives us a lot of variation in how we're creating realistic guitar strumming tracks without too much work. The next thing that you see then here is, of course, we're picking then a completely different rhythm. Again, there's some fancy key switching going on. And I'll stop it here again. Basically, the modulation wheel changes up the dynamics of how hard the strumming happens on the guitar. When you think in terms of a guitar player playing through his chord progressions, then you never get just a steady dynamic sound out of that. They do vary. And that is exactly what we emulate with the modulation wheel. This is, of course, coming from the solo strummer, and I'm going to scroll up a little bit here. When we get to this articulation, because the individual notes are not part of the strummer library, again, in the beginning I was talking about that they complement each other very well, but here is where this makes a difference. A lot of times guitar players vary what they play. They don't just play a rhythm all the way through, although you could do that and probably get away with. But again, this is all about very easily and very fast creating realism in what we record with these virtual instruments. And I'm going to play this back again, and you can see how we're picking these notes down here. So just a little bit more, and we're going further with the realism. Well, as promised, I'm going to show you next the X Legato. Again, the X Legato is something that allows you to create rhythms that are extremely flexible. Rather than just talking about it, let me show you what's happening. While you're watching this here, also keep an eye on the articulations that are being changed mid-rhythm and also the chords.